Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am absolutely super excited for our guest today. She is a world record-holding professional skydiver, keynote speaker, expert in peak performance, the author of 3 books, including How to Fly, Life Lessons from a Professional Skydiver, and has been featured on Forbes, Fast Company, CBS Evening News. Beyond skydiving, she's an advocate for the transformative power of psychedelic medicines, co-hosting Trust the Journey podcast, consultant, coach, speaker, author, man, this goes on and on, co-founder of the Highlight Pro Skydiving Team. Please welcome Melanie Curtis. Melanie, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Greg, thank you so much. I know my bio is a bit ridiculous. I'm a pretty voracious liver of life, as it were.
Well, that's why we're here together today.
Yeah.
So Melanie, I love talking about the endurance mindset and how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
I feel like whether it's expected or unexpected is something I feel like you learn over time. So now I'm not surprised. Whereas before, I feel like as a younger person with less life experience, I didn't really get it yet. I feel like I had an intuition or an intuitive awareness that small things over time build into big results, right? But only now being an older person with a lot more life experience, having iterated on that approach, am I highly confident that it works. You know what I mean? So I am a big believer in show up, be a metronome every day, whatever the frequency and iterative cadence of something looks like. I'm a huge believer in that because, again, I've just seen it so many times work into things in my life that I would never have anticipated experiencing or achieving.
That's awesome. So when was the first time that you realized this, and what was the situation?
Oh, God, that's a good question. I don't know if I have an exact moment when I realized it, but, I'm a life coach. So I've been working with clients for 20 years now, which, by the way, back in the day, life coaching, not cool.
Nor
But
was it cool to have one, I think.
but now it's much cooler, thank goodness. A lot of people understand the concept of having a support team and getting coaching, because that's the thing. I think earlier on in my skydiving career is probably when I started to really get this, is I was a competitive skydiver. So I would be on formation skydiving teams, meaning we would have 4 people jumping out of an airplane, building predetermined formations in the sequence that was given to us for that particular meet. And you win or lose based on how many points that you get within 35 seconds of exiting the aircraft. You have a camera person that jumps out with you and captures all of those points that you score. And so that container inside which I could see myself grow in terms of, yes, my physical skydiving skills, meaning how I push air with my limbs, whether it's individually or inside of a team environment. This is what this formation looks like. This is how I grab that grip. This is how I show that I am no longer grabbing that grip so the judges see that. All of those skills layered in. How am I on the right level? This and that. How do I leave when the skydive is over? All that stuff, including the team dynamics, the communication. I used to be someone who was really nervous. I would have a lot of anxiety, a lot of sort of social anxiety, a lot of relational anxiety. And inside the container of the team environment, we had things that we called pass the rocks, where it was a structured, facilitated by us, but committed communication experience that was built into how we succeeded as a team. And so that stuff one pass the rock doesn't do much, but doing a pass the rock over a decade of competition experience, you see how that impacts how you are as a leader, how you are as a teammate, what you can do as a group when you process emotion, communicate at that level, but also commit on the same level in terms of training to the physical skills as well.
Can you give us an example of how you've used that pass the rock concept in your coaching?
Yeah. Well, in other teams. So I have other teams that I'm a part of entrepreneurially. Trust the Journey is a great example, which is the podcast you mentioned in my bio. I have a podcast partner, Jason Miletsky, that I founded that show with. And we are both world level pro skydivers. And so we grew up inside of this type of practice. And so we absolutely have brought it to our team practice in the podcast. And I'm telling you, it works in the sense that are he and I always on the same page? Do we never have a dissonant moment relative to communication? Well, of course we do. We're human beings. We're building a project. We're pushing ourselves. We're on that edge, as it were, to grow, learning how to interview, how to set up this particular business, how to deal with websites. Like there's so many different various pressures that we deal with on top of just developing a partnership and a working collaboration. So we both recognize how important that is, and we implement it in our partnership so that we can continue to love each other as friends, as well as do our best for the business and creative venture that we have put forward.
So I think I mentioned to you when we connected first that skydiving's on my bucket list, and
Mhm.
it's a bucket list item, I would imagine, for millions of people. But whether we actually get in the airplane, in the aircraft to actually push ourselves or be pushed or jump, um, I would love to hear from you sort of the power of
Mhm.
skydiving, and what it could teach somebody like me who's daydreams about it a little bit, especially around the year end and year setting goals and all that kind of stuff. Give us, like, talk me into it. Tell me, like, I should be booking my first jump once the snow goes away. Uh,
Right.
Help me get off over this hurdle.
Yeah, well, I have to say, caveat, I do believe that skydiving is a very personal choice, and so I don't really care if people do it or don't do it. I care if people are in recognition with a calling inside themselves to do it or not do
Mhm.
it. So just to be clear, that should precede my share about my transformational experience with skydiving. You know, I it's been such a just pivotal, crucial, key piece of my existence in this lifetime. And I say that because I started skydiving really young. I was 18 when I did my first jump, and I was exposed to aviation, skydiving at a very young age because my dad we had an airport literally at my house, like a grass strip behind my house. And we had a skydiving center there. So I saw skydiving at a really young age. I was exposed to it. Now, the thing I think that's important to also share, and I briefly touched on this, is I was a really not shy, bold, and willing to do things type of kid.
Mm.
And I was also a highly anxious kid. So both of those things, for example, like singing a solo in the high school musical, I like leapt off the stage and ran into the crowd, like unplanned, like that type of stuff, like really being in the moment, going for it type of stuff. I remember the first time I said the F word as an 8-year-old kid and felt liberated. You know what I mean? Just like pushing those boundaries. It wasn't a new thing for me. So skydiving wasn't the first time I did that. But what makes it distinct is like imagine yourself, and this is my experience, but I was sitting literally on the edge of an open aircraft door in flight. The door is open, it's loud, the sound is deafening. Inside my head, I'm like no, like, don't do this. Like, you cannot do this, right? And that's sort of the mindset that people usually look at skydiving with. There's no way I could do that. I hear that line all the time. And so I'm sitting there staring 5,000 feet, nothing between me and the ground, terrified. And yet I still reach out and put my hand on the strut of the small Cessna aircraft that we're flying. I reach out, put my other hand on it. My face is now in the prop blast, wind like rippling my face, right? And this is what I trained on the ground to do. This is what I sat in the first jump course and learned about for so many times as a kid, right? So when I come to this moment, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm certain I can't do it. And yet I still like hop my butt off the floor. I'm supposed to hang on the strut of the airplane. That's why I'm holding on to it. And I just fall off. I can't hold on. I hop out and I fall off immediately. And I literally kick and scream. Totally. And I'm doing a static line, which people don't maybe understand what that is, but it's like my parachute is deployed for me when I fall a certain distance away from the aircraft. And so I hop out, I kick, I scream, and then I have a parachute open above my head. And it's like, holy crap. Now, that's not necessarily the transformational moment though, right? Because I still have to fly myself to the ground. Like, I'm certainly having a moment of like, holy shit, I did this, right? Holy crap, I'm now seeing the world and myself. I'm starting to have this experience that I can't label in any way, that it's real time happening. I'm seeing myself and my capability from a new perspective, right? But imagine then I fly to the ground, I land, and I'm safe again on that solid ground that I understand. I'm back in the environment that makes sense to me. And I can't stress this enough, Greg, that moment of landing and having done this thing I was certain I could not do fundamentally altered the direction of my life and fundamentally altered my psyche. Now, it's not hashtag life coach, I can do anything, I'm suddenly so capable. It's more about fear and how I had to at least question what fear was telling
Mm.
me I couldn't do. And so now you take that 18-year-old person, doesn't really realize this has happened to her, but yet I face these things. Do I study abroad in Australia? That's a small story in my, but those things. Do I write a book? Do I quit my job in investment banking and go after my dream of being a pro skydiver? Like, there are so many examples of how this has impacted my existence since that moment.
So I have to ask, the time between you pushed yourself off the airplane
Mm-hmm.
and the chute opening for your first time, did that feel like a long time? Like you're halfway in that distance and you're wondering if it's really going to open? Or did it just happen so fast that you don't really remember?
I'm laughing because I'm so delighted being back in the memory,
Right?
Thank you for asking. You know, have you ever read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
I have not yet read that one yet.
I'd add it to the list. The reason I bring that up is that how he describes how time slows down. I'm sure people have had
Mhm.
experiences like that, whether they're afraid, but it's the system sort of reacting to a perceptible like danger, a perceptible situation that requires immediacy and attention. And so there's so much there that we could pull on, but I vividly remember it's sort of like I blacked out, but also didn't at all. It's very strange feeling because I totally remember falling off. I remember my hands being pulled off the strut because of the weight of my body and the rig on my back. I remember kicking and screaming, and then I remember the parachute being open. So I remember it, but I'm sure it was 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So very, very short time.
It's interesting. I do long distance triathlon. That's my
Mhm.
thing. And when I get to the finish line, and it's a 14-hour day for me, so I'm a back of the packer, but I get it done. When I get to the finish line, it feels as if I started like 20 minutes ago.
Right.
And it's truly 14 hours ago when the cannon went off and I was in the water.
Yep.
And now I'm pushing the finish line. And it's like, it's amazing how time and memory and all that sort of comes together. Digging deep a little into that, Melanie, you talked about that there's no way your brain is just telling you, you can't do this, don't do this, don't do it. And your heart is just, it's inching you closer and closer to the edge.
Yep.
Let's dig into that a little bit deeper, because I find that when I am about to go do a keynote or about to do some sort of effort that everything in my body, my mind is like, don't do it. You're not ready. That's the time for me to lean in. And
Yeah.
that's the time that my most vivid experiences happen. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is a huge thing that I stand for and speak about because of the power of it. Now, I tend to say like fear and discomfort because they're distinct. Not all discomfort is fear, but fear is discomfort. So fear is a sort of main pillar of discomfort, but fear and discomfort as the door to peak performance. Like if we
Mhm.
talk about, and I mentioned, okay, your focus zooms in or this or that, you enter a flow state in your long runs and your triathlons. That flow state experience is crucial to accessing peak performance, and I'm no expert per se on flow. I highly recommend Stephen Kotler's work. All of his Flow Research Collective stuff is all really excellent. Um, but why I bring it up is that one of the key pieces of entering flow state is this skill challenge differential, meaning you don't typically enter flow if the challenge is too great, you are too new or something like
Mhm.
that, and you don't necessarily enter flow if there is no challenge. If you're like, I got this." There needs to be like at least some separation between those two. And so when we think about a keynote speech, for example, great example, because every time you step onto a stage, it's a new audience, it's a new experience. You want to drop into flow. So as a keynote speaker, for example, if I go out there and I'm like just saying the same words, totally memorized, having no connection with the audience, no openness to the fact that this has a crucial element of the unknown for me, I'm not gonna do as well. I'm gonna be some robot up there, and I'm not gonna be with the human beings in the room,
Mhm.
or I'm not gonna unlock the best possible experience for all of us in the room because I have been unwilling to allow for that distance, right? That challenge gap and go and accept that I don't know, and I can't possibly know how exactly this is gonna go. So, anyway, I could go on and on about this stuff. Clearly.
That's super helpful. I want to jump back into skydiving and in particular training.
Okay.
Um, you mentioned training on the ground.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's the experience when you're pushing out of the plane and you're practicing before competition. But I would imagine most of your training is on ground. But I'm super uneducated about this. So educate us about sort of the training aspect, both physical and mental,
Yeah.
to be a competitive skydiver.
Yeah, yeah, good question. Just like at everything else, there are basic skills that you need to learn, so technical skills. One of my favorite quotes recently, I can't remember who said this, but it's something, basically that you need to learn the technical skills, and then you have to let it all go, right? So
Mm,
the best competitors, for example, I say this a lot when I'm coaching new skydivers on basic skills. I'm like, you have to actually put the time in to understand neutral body position. What is that
mm,
core balance look like? Where are my arms? Where are my legs? Where are my elbows? Where are my hands, etc.? What and where from that neutral body position do I move so as to stay balanced, to move in such a way that when I am unbalanced, I'm going where I want to go? And how do I make that a repeatable thing, right? That's all technical, right? And so then there's also this experience of learning how to, quote unquote, let all that go. But I often coach, there's a difference between go there and do this, right? If I'm saying do this, I'm having you kind of think about your foot, your leg, your knee placement, whatever, which is harder. That's in the technical, we're learning the basics, and that's a tough time. And this is not just skydiving. I mean, I could say this about any skill building of any kind. When we're first learning it, it's like harder. We're not that good at it. We have to get through that period. And then when we talk about go there versus do this, if I say go there, you can start to see, what does your body already know? What is already what have you put in your body? And now you can start to practice the skill of trusting that, right? So when I'm getting out and I'm in a 4-way competition, for example, and I have a certain sequence of points or a world record, for example, I'm not thinking about where my foot is. I'm not thinking about, oh, I got to dig my knee in harder here. You know what I mean? Maybe in the prep and the visualization a little bit, but not usually at all. I'm more thinking about the sequence of points because I'm trusting my body to do what it needs to do to see that picture that I need to see. You know what I mean? Which is in the go there mentality. So same thing with the world record. Diving out last, I'm not thinking about what my body is doing. I am thinking about what I am seeing, and that my body does what it needs to do to create the picture I need to see so that I can get into that world record slot and be the teammate in that capacity as well.
Fantastic. This question popped into my head for some reason.
Yeah.
Are you the person that when I'm sitting at a football game or watching it on TV and the American flag comes from, an airplane or a helicopter that came over and somebody parachuted into the stadium? Is that you?
I've never jumped a flag, like a large flag into a stadium, but yeah, for sure. That is actually what I do primarily as a professional skydiver now. They're called demonstration jumps, but those also, if people want to see a really cool demonstration jump, they should go to my Instagram, Melanie Curtis 11. I have some really cool skydiving demonstration jumps into big stadiums. We did one into Lumen Field in Seattle, where the Seattle Seahawks play. Megan Rapinoe, she's an amazing soccer player. Her jersey retirement ceremony, our team got asked to do the jump for her, which was a career highlight, honestly. It was wonderful to get to do that. But highly technical, super, super technical skydive. Not very many people in the world can do that, but I'm very grateful that I get to do stuff like that because of the skills that I've built over time.
It's an awesome video. I mean, when you exit the airplane, you could barely see the stadium and you sit there and you go, but anyway, that's for your professional expertise. I'm going to shift gears on you slightly, Melody, and talk about your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure.
Talk to us about what you do professionally outside of skydiving. And then I want to understand sort of how you've used those principles as a professional skydiver into your business life.
Yeah, I am vastly, deeply, wildly, ridiculously fascinated by the human experience, by human beings, by just what is this life? What is this experience? And how can we get the most out of it? Which is totally why I have been drawn to being a coach, why I truly feel it is an honor to get to be with people in their experience of trying to both heal, access their dreams. Like, again, that can sound really cliche, but it's brave to acknowledge what your dream is and not have any idea how to get there, right? And to also step outside of ourselves and say, I need help. I want support. And that I feel that vulnerability. I've certainly been there myself. I say, like, if your coach doesn't have a coach, get a new coach. Like being in the work myself matters a great deal to me also. And, skydiving is a good example of like maturity in a career, in the sense that I started off really obsessive, holy smokes, filled my life with it. Again, competitive, worked in the sport, quit my job as an investment banker, spent all that money getting good at skydiving, traveled the world as a pro skydiver, headlining coach at events around the world, met thousands of people. Oh my God, I'm getting tired. Okay, maybe I should slow down a little bit. Like the bell curve of my skydiving career is very present because my skydiving career is almost 30 years long. And so now I'm in a much more mature place with skydiving. Like we even broke up. I joke that we even broke up for a couple of years, where I didn't jump for a couple of years, which for me is very long. And
Mm.
so now I feel really at peace with my relationship with skydiving, in that I do it when I want to. I only coach the way that I want to coach. I continue to give back in the ways that I love to give back, which is with new jumpers, helping them navigate the community, learn how to fly. It's just help them with fear, all this type of stuff. But the demonstration jumps, those are more connected to championing women and championing people to do more. It's connected outside of the sport of skydiving in this way. Like I said, I don't really mind if people go skydiving, but if they're called to, I want them to
Mm.
see what's possible. And if they're not, I want them to consider what's possible, maybe beyond what they've currently thought that they're capable of. So all of that is now how I contribute to skydiving, actually is more outside of skydiving, meaning the keynote speeches that I do. I'm talking and using our world record as an example. I'll talk about these demonstration jumps if they're the right story to tell for a certain lesson I want to teach. If we're talking about fear, we're talking about discomfort as this door to leaving nothing on the table in our life. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how it connects. I could
Mhm.
easily talk for 30 hours without taking a breath about all of that, but yeah.
So are you coaching skydivers? Are you coaching business owners? Like, who's your audience? Who's your customer base?
Yeah, I tend to work with the more type A person. So like I joke I'm a recovering sort of type A, recovering perfectionist, ha ha ha. But really I'm working with those people who see my life force and are drawn to the level of intensity with which I bring that I bring to my life, and I bring to everything that I do, whether it's in skydiving or out of skydiving. I have a ton of trust and respect. I'm in skydiving. And so a lot of my clients come to me from that still, but it's not only that, certainly entrepreneurially as well. I mean, as a keynote speaker and facilitator, I work with sales teams and the people
Mm.
that are like the sales offsites, the personal professional development for teams, employee resource groups, stuff like that.
That's super helpful. I'd love to talk about your podcast,
Yeah.
Trust the Journey. Can you give us a little bit of insight of what you cover, how long you've been doing it, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, Trust the Journey. Gosh, it's over 6 years now. We just crossed 171 episodes, which for
Congrats.
anybody, thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. For anybody who does a podcast, they know how much work that is. It is incredibly challenging, but I'm super, super proud of it. What is important to say about Trust the Journey, I think most, is that it started as just an idea. It started as an intuition. So my podcast co-host, Jason, he reached out to me one day, just a message on Facebook Messenger, and was like, and we knew each other throughout the years, but weren't super close. He was kind of a machismo, like he would own this, by the way. He would like want me to say this. He's grown as a person a great deal. So we weren't necessarily tight, even though we crossed paths a bunch of times throughout the years. One time, he sent me this message, and he's now sort of on his own growth and healing path. He's really like growing, healing, and caring to really alter the trajectory of his relationships and how he shows up in the world and this and that. And I saw that. I could see that from sort of afar as a person in the sport. Sends me this message, "Hey, I think I don't know why, but for some reason, I think we should work together in some way." And I was like, yeah, cool. Like it was sort of an intuitive yes right away, even though we didn't know what it was. Long story short, we started just talking and recording our conversations. And literally, we didn't even know we were doing a podcast, but it became a podcast. Like the first 11 episodes are virtually torture to listen to because the audio is so bad and this and that, but the conversations were so rich and so good. We were like, "Oh, okay, that's what we're doing." And so then apply all this, like, values-centered, growth-centered, spiritual seeking. The psychedelic thread of the conversation grew in the sense that we both were exploring and finding that path for our own healing, and then learning and growing into our own public voice and advocacy around it, which took some time. You know, I had to see Tim Ferriss and be like, Tim Ferriss is way bigger than me. He's talking about psychedelics. I should be able to talk about it publicly. I'm not advocating for anything illegal or dangerous, right? I'm advocating for learning and growing and exploring a topic if you are so called.
So on that topic,
Mhm.
for those of us that are curious
Mhm.
about the power of psychedelics, like where do you go for the learning aspect of it, and then a
Yeah.
little bit for the journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and again, I'm no expert. Just want to say that out loud. I am a passionate citizen. I am a passionate participant. And, I created this Google Doc that has a bunch of links on it, which sounds silly, but as someone who is growing as a conduit of information, I'm happy to share that link for people to check it out for sure. I slowly get on information calls with people who want a safe space to ask questions.
Mm.
So I'm not necessarily saying they need to call me or I'm the person to talk to, but I would start listening to other shows. I would listen to Psychedelics Today podcast. That's a very rich podcast about the space. So there's a lot you'll understand about the legality, the decriminalization movement, but also people who facilitate ceremony, the indigenous practices. There's so much that it is a part of this conversation. My best friend, she owns a healing and retreat center in Florida, in Brooksville, Florida, and legally they are a church, which is sort of the gray area to be able to serve sacrament. So they work primarily with the medicine ayahuasca, and I recommend that place all the time because I know if people go there, if people experience the medicine in a safe way and they've asked the right questions for themselves to ensure their safety and the fit for themselves to do something like that, I know they're gonna be safely held there and very fully respected in that space, which is important because these medicines open us up to things that have been sort of locked inside us a long time. You really, really, in my experience, need a very, very safe
Mm.
container to access those things and to make sure that you're leaving that experience more healed as opposed to harmed in any way.
That's super, super helpful. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing that Google link,
Not at
I'll
all.
love to throw it into the show notes.
Not at
Um,
all. I mean, that's why I did it. It's a good example, actually, Greg. Another example of not caring if it doesn't look perfect or isn't super perfect. You know what I mean? I'm like, people are asking me all these questions. I'm like, okay, I can't spend all my time talking about and answering questions about psychedelics, even though I would love to do that because it's a passionate topic for me. But so that's why I'm like, oh, I'll put up a call and people can pay me a nominal fee if they want an hour of my time. But the Google Doc is just me going, what have I been telling people when I started to talk to people and people have asked me questions, and I just started to put it in a thing in case people didn't want to get on the phone. I could at least send them something where they could dive into a bunch of links and start really learning for themselves.
that's amazing. It's funny you just mentioned not caring if it's perfect. I have so many projects that are 81% done that I'm just not willing to put out in the public domain. Um, and I'm just thinking about one right now that I'm working on that I think I just got to get it out there and let the ball bounce.
Oh, yes. So here's an entrepreneurial quote that I love too, Greg, is If you're not embarrassed by your first launch, you waited too long. Like, I love that quote because it does speak to, because there is this, and I've experienced this entrepreneurially as well, and I've seen it with clients all the time, like many times, is the preparation is important. We don't just wanna recklessly throw stuff out there. We can, it's like, that's fine too, but that's not as thoughtful as doing some preparation and consideration before we launch, but preparation can absolutely turn into the avoidant thing. "Oh, I'm preparing, I'm preparing, I'm preparing." That can absolutely happen. Like, if I think about my earliest branding in my life coaching business, oh my god, super cringe, mega cringe. But at the same time, I'm okay with people seeing my evolution because they know where I've come from and how far I've come.
100%.
Yeah.
Melanie, audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, my website is melaniecurtis.com. If you want to email me directly, it's mel@melaniecurtis.com. Yeah, the podcast is trustthejourney.today. Just thrilled to be here, and I really welcome anybody who resonated with anything that I shared. Please do reach out.
Absolutely. And we'll obviously include those in the show notes. Melanie, I love the journey that you took me on today. Like, my palms are still sweating thinking about you sitting on that airplane at 18 years old, holding onto the struts, about to jump up. But there's so many metaphors in our life and the life lessons. And then we just finished it off with that fantastic quote. Like, and it's so true, if you're not embarrassed about your first launch, I'm just thinking about like my first shows, my first race, my first everything, your first kiss. Like, if you're not embarrassed about it, you waited too long.
Yeah.
Audience members, if you got some value out of our show today, please like the show. Please subscribe to this podcast. Let's follow Melanie in her journey. Thank you for all the work that you do and the inspiration, and again, the energy you brought with you today.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits